All right, a very good evening, everyone. I am so happy that I get your attendance, I get your presence at such a short notice, and I thank the organizers, okay, and all the volunteers who put together this, the good response that we got. I'm really happy, and as he said, this work has been continuing for over 6 years, and it was developed over phases. Now whatever I'm presenting to you is almost like a 90% work done. So it's kind of in a deployable form for general discussion. So we'll just straight away get to the presentation, and it might, because, it's a big disclaimer in the beginning itself, I am not a specialist in any of these subjects. Even though I have done my studies in different fields, my actual passion emerged much later, once I finished all that. So I'm more of a synthesizer, a generalist, you might say, where I go to a discipline because it addresses my question. But I don't go too deep. The point is to synthesize, and I will come to that why. Okay, so the topic I'm choosing today is the predicament and the path. As we know, predicament doesn't have a solution. Okay, so normally Hindi में दुविधा कहते हैं उसको. So it's a situation I feel that we are right now in. It's a specific condition, a general condition that we are all going through. And I would like you to know that predicament, the conclusion that we are in a state of predicament was, I had come to that conclusion a long time back. But my point was, I will not place this before anyone till I have some path way forward to suggest after that. Because this is where most of the stories end. You pick up any book, it diagnoses so well, and at the end, they just fizzle out. And that is something even I experienced, and I felt it is very cruel to present something like this without pointing towards any way forward action. Okay, so now that I feel there is something actionable possible, I am presenting you this diagnosis. Okay? Okay? The goal here is to basically locate our work within this larger context. When you are here, I would like you to understand one thing, that we wear several hats throughout the day. We wear a personal hat, family hat, professional hat, community hat, national hat, our religious, spiritual belief hat. We wear several of these hats, okay? But the hat that we don't usually wear is the civilizational citizenship or planetary citizenship. Okay, and we are not even, to be very frank, to be very honest, there is no need for any of us to do that on a day-to-day basis. But to absorb today's conversation, I would request for at least 1 hour for all of you to, keep your regular hats off and wear your civilizational and planetary hat. Okay, as if it matters to you seriously, like the other hats do. That is the best way to deal with the content that we are going to just discuss. You are having a civilizational mandate to know about this and to do something about it, as well as a planetary. Mother Earth also requires you to do something about it. Okay, so let's forget all other things for a while we are discussing this topic. This is basically trying to convey, this image is trying to convey you something. Okay, for example, all of us see night sky and we see a lot of stars, but if you're not trained to identify patterns in the sky, most of us will never identify any of those patterns. But the beauty is, if someone, incidentally we have a lot of, telescopes and this section. So unless we are trained to see one, the beauty is once you are able to see a particular pattern in the sky, okay, the Polaris or the Bear, it is very difficult to unsee it. So what I'm trying to tell you here is, just like the fish is covered with water, doesn't realize what is water, we are also covered with a lot of things going on around us. Unless we put a name to it, it's very difficult to deal with this. And that has been my effort. That has been my effort to identify this pattern which seems very invisible and give it a name, give it a structure so that it helps us deal with something so large. This goes to say many things. The first image that you see, it's a very famous, the parable of the blind man and the elephant. We all know this parable that blind men are trying to describe the whole elephant by their direct experience of different organs of that elephant. But we know, someone who can see the whole elephant knows that each of them, they may be correct. Okay, the legs may feel like a pillar, but an elephant is not a pillar. Similarly, a trunk might feel like a pipe or something, but we know it is not true. But it is partially true, correct. It is the reality of those blind people, but it is not the whole elephant. This is what we are facing as humanity also. All of us come from our own disciplinary background, and we all come with our own hammers, and then we are obliged to treat everything like nails. Okay, so a climate change expert might want to interpret everything in terms of climate, and same goes for a population expert, or goes for someone is maybe seeing everything in terms of geopolitics. So what happens is they try to explain the entire phenomenon using their own discipline. But the whole elephant is much bigger. And how do we know that? We know that because in spite of this grand analysis, the overall trajectory year on year goes on in a direction that everybody says we are surprised. Nothing seems to be stopping this. Okay, so even I felt this when I started my work. And I felt there is a need for some kind of synthesis and integrated lens. So there are people using individual or at the most two lenses, ecological lens or an economic lens, but you're leaving out, let's say, a complexity dimension of the lens. So there are many lenses out here. So there is a need for, whenever you look at a particular event, you try to look at from as many lenses as possible. In this whole presentation, I've tried to simplify it. So I'm restricting myself to mostly three lenses. A very wide ecological lens, a very critical energy lens, and the complexity lens. Complexity. Okay? I will describe what I mean by complex. And this is the most neglected part of public discourse. The energy, everybody understands. Okay? Ecology, everybody understands. And climate comes within that, okay? But complexity is something that is not discussed. And take it from me, it is a very important element that changes the diagnosis and the urgency factor altogether. So I'll do my best to restrict the whole thing within these lenses so that it becomes manageable. See, the whole point of this is enough people can come together and agree on something. And what we are right now seeing is a world which doesn't agree on literally anything. So no conversation is ever possible if you can't agree on what's wrong, perhaps why it's wrong, and then we're all set for what is to be done about it. So we are in the era of post-truth, where everybody's truth is equally valid. And unfortunately, no kind of navigation, collective work happens like this. We need to have a shared understanding, shared reality of what's happening. So this is one of the original contributions of this framework. Okay, I call it paradigm affordance pyramid. Okay, it's a very structured way of trying to understand or diagnose our current situation. Okay, so now we have to imagine, this is like an integrated lens of ecology, complexity, and energy and all of it. So imagine our entire civilization, imagine the entire planet as a pyramid. Okay, imagine it to be a pyramid. The term affordance is very important. This chair gives affordance for you to sit. Okay, similarly, a tree affords some fruits to emerge from it. So everything in nature provides some affordance. I think it's an ecological concept by Gibson, if I'm not wrong. So I have done something. I've taken up concepts, metaphors, which were applicable for one sector, and I have used it very liberally, like a synthesizer, where it is useful for us to articulate. Okay, so now I'm using this word pyramid, this word Affordance here in what sense? The base affords the next layer, structure, and that affords the superstructure layer. Okay. So what am I trying to say here? The civilization, the life on Earth, all of it is basically sustained by the biophysical basis, biophysical energetic basis. Everything on all life on Earth is sustained by this base layer, including our civilization. Human beings would like to think we are separate or we are special in some sense, but there's nothing special about us. Just like others, we are equally dependent upon that base. Everything started with that base. Then what we have is a structure. Structure is basically now we are entering the domain of only humans, and the structures that we have created, especially in the last 200 odd years. Okay, that is the structure I'm talking about. Institutions that we created, infrastructure that we created. Okay, and all the institutions, the railways, the ship, the factories, all of it, state institutions, democracy, all of that are afforded because we went through an extraordinary last 200 years. Whatever structures and institutions we see today, it's a result of what happened in the last 200 years and maybe last 10,000 odd years. Okay, I will come to expand this more, and finally I'm talking about the superstructure. The superstructure is basically our world views. What we think is very natural. For example, it's very natural for us to think that progress. So the son has to have a better life than the father, and it's a natural, it's something like a law of gravity. You know, a poor country should become middle income, and then it will become a developed economy. So it is treated as some kind of physical law, okay, but we forget that it is not something so. So all our social expectations, aspirations, all of it falls there. And most importantly, our assumptions. Our assumptions. All the assumptions that go into our structure, you know, that materials will always come, energy will always come. We just have to be ingenious. And like the people in the past, if we are ingenious, we deploy technology, and then we go on this track. So that is the infinite expansion worldview. And it is taken for granted. And all our institutions reflect it. And we are basically the cogs in that large wheel. We also believe so. We expect and we operate in that. So that is the paradigm. So basically superstructure is the paradigm. And the beauty of paradigm is there are certain things nobody questions in that. It is taken for granted. Okay, so this is where we are. So why I'm showing you this? I show you this to help quickly diagnose a particular situation. How do we know something is wrong? Okay, if you look at a phenomenon, how do we look at this pyramid and decide something is wrong? When there is a misalignment, when there is a base depletion, and if the institutions continue to behave as if we have abundance, or the superstructure tells us that everything is fine, just go on, then we realize something is not right. Okay, so this imbalance is what we get to immediately understand. So this is going to be foundational in whatever we discuss from here on. This is more like a decoding and sense-making tool. Everybody understands this, right? It's an embedded, nested structure. Economy sits within the larger society. Remember, even before industrialization, we had decentralized societies. Okay, they were always there. They are still there. But economy is now growing. So economy sits within this larger society, and that sits within the larger biophysical reality. This is something that our mainstream economics or mainstream models do not consider. It's some kind of a parallel reality, but it is very real also. Each one of us are its participants, so we cannot say it's some kind of fiction. It's very real. Okay. So now let's come to, I'll be going a little fast, okay, slow down, tell me to slow down if you feel it's too fast. So before we move into the question of what is this civilization I'm talking about, we need to understand what do we understand by complexity. Because when we say something will simplify, something could collapse, how do we know? There has to be some markers. So today, if you see on the left side, those are the indicators of a very complex civilization. What are those? Food surplus. We have amazing surplus of food. Human beings have never seen this kind of surplus. We have large population. And very strangely, large population is a good thing in this model. Okay, we have to consistently grow beyond 2.1%. That's a minimum baseline. It's not seen as a bad thing for a population growth to continue. Nation state. Why nation state emerged only in the last 200 years? It could not have happened in this way in the past. This amount of centralization could not be possible without cheap energy, cheap and dense fossil energy. You cannot have large military centralized security systems. You cannot have centralized administration or state. It's a very exceptional phase that we are going through, and that is the full-time security system that we have. Same goes with urbanization, water, piped water, 24/7, 365 days. I mean, we are the real exceptions in the history of humanity. Okay, and now almost everyone has it. It is almost like if you don't have it, then something is wrong. You feel something is wrong. But it is a very exceptional phase that we are living through. Water, energy, sewage. We don't have to worry what happens after the flush. Very few civilizations had experienced something like this. Transport system, global supply chain. You could plan to go anywhere. You can plan to go anywhere at a moment's notice. Leisure and entertainment. At this scale, sports, space establishments. I have not listed everything. I have listed some of them because when we talk about simplification, it will be easier for all of us to imagine what goes away. And then imagine our lives when these things disappear. Okay, how do we live? All these things make our current way of life possible. Okay, this is the complexity. Now we come to the most important and little dense slide, so I will go slow, a little bit slow here. One of the reasons that this conversation is difficult to make because we are talking at the level of civilization. And it is a very abstract term for most people. You can't connect. India, we understand. Okay, we can understand nation state. We also understand sectors, but we can't understand what is civilization. Okay, so that is why when anyone talks about civilization under instability or whatever, that language is so abstract that then we can't engage with it. It feels like a very abstract problem to deal with. So my endeavor was to make this a little more tangible. What do you mean when I say globalized industrial civilization? Okay, it means more or less all 8 billion people are part of this, but it is a set of tangible stuff. Once we understand that, it's easier to talk about way forward. So basically, GIC has, think of it like a table with 8 legs. Okay, I have drawn a circle for telling you that all these. Imagine if all these legs were circularly dependent. That means if one gets affected, all the 8 also get affected. Okay, this tool is not like that. Okay, if you just take one, it is still, you can still sit. So this one is different. So which are these 8? So what we use a term called keystone hubs. Now it's a biological term, but a systems expert called David Korowitz, he published a paper where he introduced this idea of keystone hubs. Like we have biology, we have keystone species, okay, on which most other species depend. We also have in our global industrial civilization, we have these 8 keystone hubs. What are these? Basically, to start with, energy, entire energy infrastructure, right from extraction all the way till the consumer. The entire supply chain of fossil fuel and renewables, everything put together. Now that's one integrated stool. It is kind of a hemoglobin for this metabolism of GIC. Without this, there is nothing. I will prove that also. Second is finance. You see, everything is financialized now. Okay, everything is financialized now. So during note bandi, we all know that note disappeared and we did not know how to organize our activities. There was no actual shortage, but we didn't know how to organize. That's what happened when finance, if there is a meltdown or there is a cyber attack, something of that sort, finance gets affected, banking and finance get affected, the whole thing comes to a halt because that is our primary way of organizing with each other. Okay? Similarly, critical infrastructure, water infrastructure, roads, everything, all the critical infrastructures, our internet lines that go undersea cables, all of that put together. Similarly, you have production, global supply chain connected by just-in-time systems. What is just-in-time system? Nobody keeps a 6-month stock anymore in their factories. So the raw materials go down, automatically a demand generated in 15 days, you get your raw material. So this is a Japanese system which has become like a global system. But during COVID, everyone realized that it is not that smart. It was very efficient. It got your cost down dramatically and you started going further away for your supplies because it is so cheap and technology made it possible. But when things become unstable, the same thing, your efficiency becomes fragility. So that is what we are experiencing during this COVID, wars, all of this. Suddenly people are remembering friend shoring and all of that, okay? But I'll tell you it's very difficult to do that. Next is scale, something very critical. Economy of scale. This is fundamental. GIC, now remember I'm calling GIC as a super organism. That means it has a life of its own now. We created this piece by piece, but it has a life of its own today. And GIC as a superorganism favors everything large, everything monopolized, centralized. So one China as a manufacturer of the world is cheaper for everyone. So everybody is now specializing. Okay, so economy of scale doesn't favor mom-pop stores, kirana ki dukan, none of that. That gives you more resilience. It's slightly more expensive, but it is not favoring. Same happens to all these startups. They are forced to become big. They can't remain at that stage. Once they start an idea, now they are forced. Otherwise, they'll be kicked out. So what they do, they take money for expanding market share in technology, but then they lose all the essence of what they started off. And the founders are kicked out. It's a very structural phenomenon. It's very biased towards economy of scale. Monopolizing is favored in the system. It's not like a glitch or something. The system favors it. The sixth one is trust. Institutional trust is very essential. We take trust for granted. Two countries are trading, they are giving each other credit. Why? Because in an expanding economy, global economy, you want to trust each other. You want to do business again. So you trust, you give credit. But when things go down, or things go bad, this whole trust disappears. This trust disappears. Now what happens? If you don't, if there is a bread basket failure, wheat failure here, they will say India will give us. But then India says, we can't give you. Hamare yahan pe bhi problem hai. So that trust starts breaking. I'll give you a very classic case. I think during the COVID it happened, I don't remember, where there was, Pakistan suffered. Pakistan had a deal of gas with some country, some company. And during that period of COVID, the prices went so up that the company paid the penalty and then gave it to somebody else. So see, what is happening? That trust breaks. And when the trust breaks, it's very difficult to come back. Same happens with institutions. You see a uniform of the state. Today there is some respect. One person can manage 1 lakh, 10 lakh. But that trust is very fragile. Trust is very fragile. And the world looks suddenly very different when the institutions lack that trust. And we are seeing that happening across. It has not led into something big, but we are seeing that trust going away. I have added, this is originally what David Korowitz had contributed through his work. I felt the food and health systems were missing in this component because food system is a very serious leg on which this whole thing stands, and healthcare system equally stands. Okay, and healthcare is absolutely essential for everything else to keep going. During COVID, we know that there was a study during COVID that if so many people, let's say from 23 or 24 working professionals randomly did not reach their office for whatever reason, economy starts collapsing. That means every job doesn't have redundancy. So people do have to turn up, and if they don't turn up, the institutions cannot function, the whole thing doesn't function. Anyways, so this is the 8 hubs. This is the leg, this is the thing that gets affected by trigger sources. Okay, now there are 8 trigger sources, 8 ways by which any of these legs can be destabilized. Okay, so it could be an environmental disaster, extreme weather, flood, fire, we are all seeing that. Okay, then there is you could have an energy shortage, that also we are experiencing. Geopolitical turmoil, we are experiencing. Debt bubble, which could crash anytime, that is another trouble. So there are 8 odd such. We will not get into everything. For your understanding, there are 8 into 8, 64 potential ways in which this whole thing can stop at its tracks and simplify. The very fact that it has not happened so far, it's a miracle. It is like nothing short of a miracle. Even without climate extremes, tipping points, and without whole mass extinction, all of that, this is happening on a day-to-day basis. This is something like an ICU civilization. Very low threshold for shocks. Okay, you can't simplify and expect this to remain stable. So you have an ecological foundation on which the human society and this complexity sits. If you see this tells you something. Basically, our normalcy, our day-to-day normalcy is basically a set of masks that we have put on top of it. When the mask comes off, the world looks very different. What is that mask? First is the stable Holocene conditions. For those who are not familiar with the term, Holocene condition is the last 10 to 12,000 years of post-ice age. The period during which we had stable global average temperature. Never before we had this kind of long stability. Temperature remained between 14 and 15 for almost 10-12,000 years. And during which all known history, human history, we have seen agriculture and all of that. I'm sure the knowledge of agriculture was known before also. But we didn't have those conditions. So with those Holocene conditions, we had the water store, groundwater, rivers, we had soil, rich soil accumulated. All of this came to us as an inheritance across so many years. So when we found the second mask, fossil fuels, to extract them more than any other species or any other humans ever had done in the past, it gave us great affordance to produce all this complexity in the last 100 odd years. So if you go the other ways, well, if the complexity disappears, we can't even produce food for this population. So when complexity allows for the sustenance of current way of life of 8 billion people. Even if everything else remains the same, the complexity disappears, it simplifies, we'll have trouble. But unfortunately, we are seeing there is a fossil energy, fall of energy returns. It is more expensive to get that same amount of energy. So energy is going down, the returns are going down, resources are getting depleted, Earth system is no more stable. And within that context, we have unstable keystone hubs. So this is a very scary slide, but this is something that we don't, this is the star I was referring to. It is surrounding all of us. We see bits and pieces of news coverage or papers or books, but when you put it together, it kind of gives you a much cleaner picture. I would not say this is very clean, but still, it helps us understand what is it that is vulnerable. And where is nation state in this, tell me? Where is this separate nation state? What is the existence of these nation states in this whole dynamics? Tell me. Is it possible that one gets affected and other is left out in this? The coupling is too tight in this. It's too tight. And we are fools to maybe, surround ourselves with this nationalistic language. Our destinies are too intertwined to think in terms of, it's a privilege that we're talking in terms of nations. It was true at some point, I suppose, but not anymore. So we've discussed complexity now. Now, just to clarify certain things, why energy is such an important lens. So there is this concept of energy slaves. So I hope all of us understand that before coal, oil, gas was extracted and we learned how to use that, most of the work was done by human labor or animal power, human power. Okay. So now we have to understand. Let's try to understand how many people are required to run this global industrial civilization. There are a lot of mathematical calculations in this, but a simple story is one energy slave is basically equal to continuous physical work output of one healthy human adult. One healthy adult can give you 100 watts of power, working for 2000 working hours a year. That's one energy slave. एक इंसान अगर हमारा गुलाम है तो वो इतना सेवा दे सकता है. Now to live 600 exajoules of energy wala lifestyle, if you do the math and divide it by 200 kilowatts hours of one energy slave, we need 833 billion people. How many people exist? 8 billion. And we need 100x if we want to sustain this way of life. Now do we realize how special we are? Yahi achhe din. This is the achhe din. Okay, nobody else has seen this except for the last few generations. But our expectations have grown higher. Okay, so this is what I call as the phantom or not I. There is this very famous book called Ecological Overshoot by Dr. William Catton. In the 1980s, he wrote this book and he used this term phantom carrying capacity. Okay, so this is the phantom. This energy is our phantom carrying capacity. It can disappear like this. It cannot be taken for granted. Now moving to the ecological lens. So we have seen complexity, what GIC does. We see how energy enables it to do this. What is the implication? How our activities, day-to-day, innocent day-to-day activities of buying something, traveling here to there, very innocent stuff. How does that translate? How does that connect with Mother Earth? How does planet gets affected? So this is a very famous graph. Okay, it's called the Great Acceleration. Post World War II, scientists started tracking when world population grows, real GDP grows, population, GDP, your water use, fertilizer use, land use, when all of that is happening, all of that is growing, which in our superstructure paradigm is a good thing. We have celebrated this, right? Growing GDP, development, we have all heard, the new religion of this civilization. So when something great was happening in our human history, what was happening on the other side to Earth systems? There is an exponential decline in resources and exponential increase in pollution. Carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, all of that. Forests are, tropical forests being lost. So what is celebrated as a civilization had direct correlation with the exploitation and deteriorating Holocene condition. Let's put it that way. Our Holocene conditions were going down as we were celebrating. Okay, so what is exactly driving this? What is that connection? So when we say we want GDP growth year on year, everything in this civilization needs to grow. If you ask why you need to grow, nobody knows, but everything has to grow. Okay? Everybody's income has to grow. Every government budget has to grow, tax has to grow, GDP, all of it has to, you see that, right? Every company wants to grow. You become a United States, still you want to grow. You can't, see the thing is, the richest country in the world, if it stops growing even for 1 year, it crashes. And the poorest country also needs to grow. So it's like a cycle. You have to keep riding it. If you stop, so you can't relax in this. In this system, you can't relax. So whenever we are contributing to the GDP, what exactly is happening? We are basically promoting 5 processes. What is that? Extraction process. All of us, most of us who are employed in any ways, we are part of one of these 5 processes. Either we are part of the extraction process. So farmer is also an extractor. He is extracting the nutrients of the soil. Mining is underlying everything else that we are doing, right? Production, manufacturing, distribution, consumption, and finally excretion. The economy also excretes waste. We are a classic waste producing system, but it should be away from our eyes. If it is away from our eyes, then everything is fine. Okay, so clean and green is good. I mean, we have to sometimes question. A good city is a city which has a small dumping ground, or a good city is the one which is having a lot of filth lying around. We don't know. In this context, you have to wonder. So all these 5 processes, so now we are coming to the definition of sustainability. What is sustainability and what is unsustainability? So there's a very famous ecological economist called Herman Daly. This is his definition. I have converted that into a pictorial form for our understanding. So when these 5 processes of economy, when it is more than the replenishment rate of renewable sources, when you are consuming more than replenishment, when you are consuming more than the depletion rate of non-renewables. Now groundwater is also non-renewable in some sense because it takes 500 odd years to fill the aquifers. Soil also takes thousands of years. So in that sense, for human scale, it is non-renewable. So when our consumption exceeds the depletion rate of non-renewables, and finally, it exceeds the absorbing capacity of the nature. This is the definition of unsustainability. We throw the word sustainability and unsustainability a lot, but you have to understand when someone says, when the government says, especially sustainability, they are talking about sustaining the GIC. Okay, and when ecologists and citizens use, they are perhaps thinking about this thing. So same word, but sustaining, you should always ask sustaining what? What is it that we should sustain? The state cannot give you a different answer. Business can never give you a different answer. They will say, kaisi tarah se we will manage that, but this has to grow. So you see that graph, so that is the overshoot graph. Currently we are between C and D. We have been growing. But safe, what is that safe space? Your safe space is somewhere between A and B. What made this spike possible? The last 200 years of energy, surplus and complexity. Okay? This is the most important visual of the current health of the planet. Very important paper which turned my work, which turned me towards this kind of work. This is called as Planetary Boundaries Framework. In the year 2007 or 2009, this was published. And this did amazing work. If you remember the ozone hole, everyone remembers, right? Ozone hole became very easy to convey because of that word. People could easily visualize a hole and that needs to be fixed, right? It was easy. Communication point of view, it was great. This paper and this diagram made the same contribution. It made something so complex accessible to everyone and understand what is the problem. So this is basically just like human beings have vital health parameters, right? You have blood pressure, pulse, all of that. To see whether the person is healthy or not, they chose these 9 parameters to determine the general health of planet Earth. Okay, or to put it simply, are we maintaining Holocene conditions? So which are these parameters? And everybody should look at the top one. What is that? Climate change. Can anyone notice something strange, something that is counterintuitive? You see climate change over there. Does any thought come to your mind? Sorry? It is in yellow. Fair enough. No, within the context of the whole thing, does something come to your mind? Yes? Something strange? Can you see novel entities? Can you see biospheric integrity in the red? Fresh water, phosphorus and nitrogen flows. They're all in red. We've never heard of it, right? We don't hear about it, right? What we hear about climate change? Climate change also breached this safe space. See that green space circle that you see, right? That is the Holocene condition. It is a safe operating space. Climate has just breached it. Fair enough. But what about others? So today, 7. I'll just come back to this. What you have to understand is, 2009, we had breached 3. Okay? 3 had crossed. 2015, 4 parameters had breached the safe space. 23, 6 had breached. And 2025, 7 parameters have breached. Can you see the pace at which it happened? The first one took a long time. After that, it is quick, very quick. That is why I'm telling you, when the whole movement started, people used to talk, we are doing this whole thing for our grandchildren. And very soon it has become, no, this is quite possible. This show is for us. This may not be for our grandchildren at all. Okay, so you see, this is called exponential change. It doesn't go with the same pace as in the past. So we cannot be complacent. So just take a look at this and you see, but I'll just briefly tell you, this is very important. This will change the way in which you will look at news or anything that you come across. Biospheric, climate change I won't do because most of the world has done a lot of work on climate change. So climate change, what I was trying to tell you is, climate change is one of the 9 symptoms of overshoot, ecological overshoot. Think of it like 7 bullets are approaching you and you are only dealing with 1 bullet. Is it fair? Does it make any sense? You have to deal with all of them. Otherwise, there's no point dealing only. So, and one of the reasons why, and would anyone like to tell me why you think there's so much of stress on climate change only? And why not biospheric integrity, land use change, deforestation? Why deforestation is not a big thing where all startups are coming up? Why don't you see so much of money flowing there? Attention. Why is that? Can anyone guess? There's no money. What you will do with deforestation? With climate, it's very easy. Shift to renewables. That story works very well. The shifting is basically put your money from here to there and make profits there. So the story remains the same. So you could do this with climate change. You could not easily do with what you will do with fresh water. So climate change is a very, I will come to it. But I'm just trying to tell you, we had a lot of important things. Out of that, we only focus on one. The entire global attention is on one parameter, one report card. And other parameters are missing from your report card. Imagine if it was your health profile, if it was your report. If a doctor only gave importance to his favorite parameter and ignores everything else, how would you feel? You will miss valuable time, right? And your situation gets worse. This is exactly what is happening. We're converting something super complex with something very simple. Okay, what is pushing all this? What is pushing all this? reaching, right, at exponential pace. What is pushing? It is our way of life. It is our day-to-day innocent participation. By just innocently participating, we are participants. Is there any villain in this? Is there a villain in this story? Or this politician or this business tycoon? See, my story doesn't have any villain. There's no need for villains. Why? Because today you stop fossil fuels. See, everybody blames fossil companies. They are evil. This is favorite punching bag. I feel they are the wisest people. They understand your GIC doesn't function without them. Let's assume all fossil fuel companies say, okay, fine, kal se ban. Kal se ban. You think the nations and the people will celebrate when there is no fuel? Nobody is going to celebrate. But the narrative is that there are particular villains. Nobody questions this particular force which is pushing it, because that is uncomfortable conversation. Climate change के लिए कुछ ना कुछ कर सकते हैं. Biosphere के लिए you can find a separate report which works on mapping species and one-on-one tiger reserve, this reserve, that reserve. All this is basically acceptable because a lot of money flows through it and nothing changes per se. So we are right now the only parameter. The latest entrance was ocean acidification. I hope all of you know that all the CO2 that we emit, half of it is absorbed by oceans. Over a period of time, its pH level goes. So this is the latest entrant. So very recently we added novel entities. What is novel entities? The entire industrial synthetic materials that we push into the nature. We don't know what it does. Nobody knows what it does. It is so dangerous, we don't even study about it. उसका बिल आया नहीं है अभी तक. आएगा, किसी ना किसी को बिल आएगा. But we have no idea. Why? Because it is efficient, cost efficient to not worry about it. So we have just put a random thing and they have straight away put it in the red zone because the number is so high. Maybe it will exceed all of it. It's unstudied, properly studied, still it is so high. And if you see species extinction, it has already reached mass extinction levels. You must have heard that we have entered sixth mass extinction. It is only because of that one parameter. The rate at which we are losing species every day, every year, it's unprecedented. And this is what happens during a mass extinction event. Okay? But others are still there. So I'll just quickly take you to the more accessible idea. You've all heard of Earth Overshoot Day, right? Every year, a particular day is celebrated called Earth Overshoot Day. It's not celebrated. It's basically, you have heard of carbon footprint. Okay, so your lifestyle means how much emissions you make in a given year. This is a very comprehensive, footprint analysis. It is easy to quantify what your annual activities translate into forest requirements, carbon footprint, cropland, fisheries, built-up land. So your way of life can be quantified. So totally, if you multiply that by 8 billion, you get the ecological footprint of GIC. So what it says, so basically you see that red line, December 31st. When we were in the pre-industrial phase, December 31st, by December 31st, we would consume everything that planet Earth produced. Okay. Now, this year, it was July 30th. So all that the planet produces, biomass or whatever it produces, we consume it by July. That means remaining 5 months deficit. We are drawing that phantom. Now you'll always wonder ki kahan se aaya 5 mahina. It is that phantom capacity. Here we are doing two things. We are unsustainable for ourselves, but we are also displacing other species. The overall food is same. It's called as net primary productivity. That food is same for everyone. Our share has grown in that. 10,000 years ago, human beings were only 2% of that entire mammalian population. 10,000 years ago. Fast forward 10,000 years ago today, human beings and its domesticated animals together is 96, 97%. Wildlife is only 3%. Ocean and land milakar, total. So our 8 billion has come at a huge cost. You know, very silently, a lot of things have happened. So now it's coming to us. So we take notice. So this is a very famous paper, most of you may be aware. A very famous paper was published in 1972. It is called as, not paper, it's a full-fledged report, Limits to Growth. How many of you have heard of this? Limits to Growth? Nobody. Okay. This was a MIT scientist and Club of Rome sponsored report. And they used computer models for the first time in 1972. And they asked a very simple question. What happens to industrial civilization if we go on this business as usual trajectory by the end of 2100? 130 years के बाद क्या होगा? So they tracked all that data and they made a projection, they made a prediction. They said, if we go along this path, somewhere between 2040 and 2050, we are going to see one big crash. This whole thing will crumble because resources will deplete, pollution will increase, and you can't maintain this way of life. And this is one of the most famous books written on this subject, reports on the subject, and the most controversial also. It was heavily criticized because this was the first book in the 1970s when the general belief was abundance. Abundance was the norm. And anyone who said there is limits to our growth was basically a madman. Fast forward 2017, a young researcher, she tracked today's numbers with this prediction, Gaia Harrington, and you will be surprised. The prediction, we are on track as per the prediction. Numbers match that trend. We should not be happy about it. They should be happy that they warned us, but numbers tracked. We are moving in that direction. Do you see these things reflecting in our policy conversations? Do we behave as if we are just 20 years away? When they predicted, it was at least 70 years away. We are just, but still do we see anything? All these are this is a niche space. Why it is discussed with you? Because now we have, 20 years ago, climate change was discussed among scientists only. Today, everybody writes opinion pieces and every sentence may even one flood with climate change. Because people are now dealing with this. So this is what global crisis is. In simple definition, it has two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is maladaptation of our paradigm, our thinking, and our institutions with the biophysical energetic realities. Out of sync. So in that sense, global crisis is a maladapted condition. So what would a adaptation look like? If I were to ask you, what would an adaptation look like? The thinking and the institutions will have to adapt to new realities. Okay? Something that I started off in a more coarse way, what global crisis is. It's some kind of near-term simplification of GIC. Simplification is a euphemism for collapse. Okay? And possible collapse of the biosphere also, depending upon how we simplify. So there's a big caveat. It is not given, mass extinction is not given, biospheric collapse is not given, but how GIC simplifies will determine that. Okay? So this is basically what I was trying to tell you. It's not a problem. It is not a problem to be solved or fixed by any technology. It is a predicament to be navigated. Okay, I'll come to this. Something you have to understand, how paradigm shift or how big shifts happen. Okay? Everybody knows Max Planck, right? The famous physicist. He said this, science or revolutions happen, science changes, revolutions happen one funeral at a time. That's a normal, slow process. What is he trying to say? What does that mean? One funeral at a time means what? But why funeral? Sorry? I'll tell you what he meant. He meant that senior scientists, they never change. Okay? So they will act like gatekeepers and they will allow new ideas only once they are gone. So that is what a very polite way he said. That is how you have to be patient. Your idea is not wrong, but gatekeepers have too much of investment. They've written thousands of books, lectures, suddenly now they say, no, 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 this is not wrong. So they will resist and mostly they don't change by persuasion. That's a slow way, okay? It takes, and this is what all the revolutions are like that. If you see in human history, all revolutions have happened slowly. It takes 70, 100 years, many 3-4 generations to change, and change happens. Thomas Kuhn is a philosopher of science. He framed this word paradigm shift. What he says, that every time, and he said this in the context of scientific revolutions. How scientific revolutions happen. So he says, let's say there is this established Newtonian idea, or be it Einstein's formulas, and then over a period of time that becomes like a new norm. Okay, all scientists will adhere to it, and it becomes like a given कि ये तो reality है. This is the law of nature. But then what happens? Anomalies start accumulating. Anomaly मतलब क्या है? कि real world event is not explained by that theory. Do you think scientists will abandon theory? Mostly they don't abandon theory. They continue and anomalies accumulate. And at some point, there will be a crisis, and that crisis will force a gestalt shift. You understand? So, but he also said something very nice. People don't abandon their way of thinking just because there are anomalies. They will do it when there is an alternative paradigm which does a better job. So you have to understand this. People will show inertia. Communities, civilizations will show inertia. We know this is not right. We know this is not right. But what else? You know, the Tina phenomenon. There is no other alternative. But the moment you start showing that there is an alternative, the shift happens quite fast. So anomalies people see, they recognize this is some theory is not absolute, but they will stay till there is a alternative. There's a different narrative, there's a different theory which does a better job, and then the shift happens. Okay? So the point of introducing this was slow change is doable if there is no urgency. On its own, someday it will happen. In crisis, suddenly a switch might happen. But in our case, that crisis can bring about a gestalt switch, a good switch, only if you are prepared for it. If you're not prepared for it, if you're not ready with it, then that crisis moment is not going to be bringing about that desirable outcome. So given all that I have told you now, okay, global crisis is, I have told you what it is. I have told you the importance of complexity, energy and ecology. Given all this complex diagnosis, so global crisis was my diagnosis about our overall situation. Given all of that, I am simplifying the conversation. From here on, where do you think we are heading? In a very simple way, I am trying to convey this idea. There are broadly 3 trajectories. Okay, and remember, none of this is given. Okay, none of this is given. So the first one is your scenario 1. Business as usual. Exponential growth. Exponential growth. And whatever, if we do nothing different, we are on that trajectory. All of us do what we have always been doing, we go on that trajectory. But at one point, after overshoot comes correction. Okay, the bubble bursts. That is what will happen to all of us. There is a simultaneously second trajectory also happening. This is something very invisible in most conversations. What is that second trajectory? The second trajectory is what I would call as a fortress civilization. where for a small elite, some kind of a high-tech world is possible. Okay? There is a bundle, please look it up after this, I will not go into it.
They cannot make out because of color and they cannot read which is the second.
Okay, the blue one is the second. If you can see, there are two folks in the blue one, right? The first red one is scenario one, the yellow going to red. Then you have blue with two folks. Okay, one folk going up indicates a very small elite leading a very high quality, high tech life. Okay, the tech billionaires, the Silicon Valley driven, that kind of world is in a way doable, possible. That is why you see most tech billionaires, businessmen want the world to continue the way they are. Why? Because that allows AI to develop into AGI, into SI. You see, it's important for all of us to contribute to that technological civilization. That is beneficial to that. But remember, like a rocket has a payload, right? We all know rocket starts off very big, but in the space, only the payload goes. Everything else is abandoned. Its only purpose is to take the payload to the edge of the space. So imagine something like that, okay? So scenario 2 is that, representing that payload. Everybody cannot make their space, but everybody will contribute to that place. And the rest of the society will ultimately have nothing else left. I told you, phantom capacity crashes if everybody, the elite capture the resources, elite capture all of it, then there's little left for the rest. That's a very scary situation. But scenario 1 and scenario 2 is right now happening parallelly. It is happening parallelly, even when we are not noticing. And please, whenever you come across anyone analyzing them as, they are suicidal. Billionaires are suicidal. Crackpots are not crackpots. They're not suicidal. There is a logic to that madness. Because people are saying, if the whole planet crashes, if the whole thing crashes, they will also suffer, no? It is not given. It is not necessary. So that is something we have to understand. They are not suicidal. This lecture maybe we will not. Maybe in the Q&A we can discuss that part. Scenario 3 is where as I said, I promise that there is there's no way out of this. Scenario 3 is a correction. You see that? It's a correction. But it is different from the argument of managed transition or degrowth. Okay? I explained you all of that. I explained you superorganism GIC. To conclude this point, it is very difficult to bring it down. We cannot bring it down. No, because nobody specifically controls it, how you will bring it down. But if you are ready, if you're ready for the transition, if you're ready for that window of opportunity, you might call it, or whatever, if you're ready for scenario 3, if you're ready for that opening of opportunity, something manageable is possible. Whoever makes it to the other side, it will be the best reflection of us. See, I'm not saying everybody can make it. There is no hunky-dory, there is no good story in this. There is no happy ending story in this. But now we have to act as stewards and custodians. Whoever makes it to the other side, it has to represent the best in us. The goal has changed. The goal has changed. Our responsibility is different. Not to fix scenario 1 or scenario 2. We can't fix them. What I'm trying to say is we can prefigure what is expected to happen, prepare for it when everything is fine. That is what is, and I will keep referring to scenario 3. The GCF framework is very open. It's not an analytical, it's a prescriptive framework also. I'm very explicit about, I stand for scenario 3 because that is the most actionable and moral thing to do at this stage. What do you mean by collapse? Collapse is normally the word collapse has earned a bad reputation. It's not about everyone dying, all of that. No. It basically says something simple, something complex. So city is complex. When it simplifies, you always have the rural. And that has been the case in the past. This is a very important diagram. This is a paper published in BBC by a scientist called, or a scholar called Luke Kemp. What do you see? It's a history of last 4,000 years. And what are those lines? Yes, the span of each empire. Okay, so empires were mini civilizations, right? What do you see? What is so common in all of that? Did they ever have a happy ever go after? They all collapsed. That is a plain truth. Just like human beings, they born, they die, they grow, they stabilize, and then they die. Civilizations also do the same. Empires have done that in the last 4,000 years. So it's nothing new. The average lifespan is 336 years of a empire, civilization. Okay, so, and ours is around, you can say, 200 years. Yes. But what is different now? Now, good question is this. What is different about us? What is so different? Sorry? We are making it very fast. What is the difference between these collapses and GIC's collapse? Beautiful. We are one of the few, few civilizations who could see it, document it, research it, document it in advance. See, I am talking to you. I am talking to you based on my people who worked on it earlier. This is something never happened for most cases. Okay, they would just abruptly one day. Today, Roman Empire is there. 2-3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks. No warning. I mean, they would have. There have been Cassandras. Do you know the story of a Cassandra? So Cassandra is a person in Greek mythology that he's been cursed. She's been cursed. Cassandra is cursed that she'll make predictions. She will see the fall, but nobody will believe her. Okay, nobody will believe her. So there have been Cassandras in every civilization who said, now don't do this, this is going to take us down. But then the superstructure paradigm never listens. Okay, because everything is going great. So one day you are super powerful, everybody is listening, taxes are coming, everything is fine. But the underlying rot is not very easy to everyone. So what I'm trying to tell you here, one point is we can see it, understand it much before everyone else. Great. What else is different about us? If you noticed, many civilizations lived parallelly at the same time. So when one civilization collapsed, nothing happened to the other. People could go there and people could live in that same geography after collapse also. What is different between them and us? Yes? There is no other, there is nowhere else to go. Where are you going to go? GIC is everywhere, right? So if it collapses, where we go? There is nowhere else to go. There is no other place to go. That is a big thing. It's the most unusual thing. There is we are one single entity which goes up and then it also comes down, it simplifies. But there is another trouble. I said we could move towards scenario 3, right? We are right now on scenario 1. We could move towards scenario 3 with collective efforts. But there is one big difficulty. One thing that differentiated us from all other civilizations was we have some dangerous legacies that we carry with us, which they never carried. They never had any weapons of mass destruction. They never had any weapons of small destructions like small guns, so many guns. They never had large dams which require active care. They never had the wood fuel problem is a very it's easy to imagine. Imagine if for whatever reason there is a super shortage of coal, oil, gas. What happens to Belgaum? What happens to any city? Immediate demands for wood, fuel wood, for everything. Money, security will be deployed and periphery will disappear. The forest will disappear instantly. just to manage that crisis, temporarily that too. Forests are alive because our phantom carrying capacity is there with us. So what do you do immediately? If you don't want to, because remember, the moment you cut your forest, that story ends for scenario 3. There's no scenario 3. That immediate knee-jerk action is end of story. So we can't do that. So what we will do, that has to be figured out. 80,000 large dams all over the world. India has, I guess, more than 5,000 large dams. You can't leave a dam as it is. It requires active management, because if it collapses under its own weight, flood, it has a knock-on effect. So you may be away some 50 kilometers also. You're not safe. If you have conserved your forest, doesn't make any difference. The flooding dam will destroy all of it. All your good effort will go for a toss if we don't decide what to do with dams. When everything is going fair, fine, today, dams can be decided today, not for tomorrow. Then you can't do anything. You can't go with a fauda and try to knock it off. It has to happen in a very controlled environment. So what are we going to do with these dams? Now we're talking about adding dams. What are we going to do to, and Europe, by the way, is doing this already. They are dismantling their dams. They are letting the rivers flow, and they have the surplus. So they are using it to make their future a little more livable than people like us. Okay, we want to grow, right? Like, you know, we want to imitate China. Foolishly, we want to imitate China. This is the destiny. Same is true of small arms in circulation. We never had such a large population with such a large access to weapons before in crisis. How long you will fight with a sword? How many people will fight? For some days, and then it will settle down. But imagine a society with freelance soldiers, freelance weapons, freelance. Can you imagine? We can't imagine. Same with nuclear facilities, chemical sites. We have 440 nuclear power plants all over the world, 440. And it requires global supply chain to operate. It requires high-tech management all the time. Now imagine in a state which is in trouble financially, or civil war, this, that. How will it take care of the nuclear power plants? People don't report to work. Pandemics. There are 100 ways in which I told you is possible. How will you manage a nuclear power plant? Can you just lock it like a thermal power plant and go? You can't do that. You can't do that. So what you will do with that? Waste, nuclear waste, what you will do? If you have to prevent a meltdown, what you will do? See, this tells our assumptions that electricity will always be there. This tells us that people will always be there. The technicians will always be there. That is the underlying assumption. कहीं ना कहीं से आ जाएगा. पैसा रखोगे तो वो आ जाएगा. Bio research facilities, cold storages which store chemicals, bioweapons. When you don't have access gets disrupted. You are digitizing everything. You are digitizing everything instead of manual, and then there is no sustained power supply, cyber attacks. 100 things are happening simultaneously. What do you do with that? AI is a separate ball. AI changes everything, by the way. AI, the way it is going, it changes the future for the elites also. The elites are unhappy with it because it is not aligned with them. They want it. The tech billions, many of them are not happy the way the AI is going because it could go out of hand with them also. So if AI goes at the present pace, then it's basically game over for elite also in a big way. So if you don't do anything, that has to be stopped. This also, if it goes, but the problem with AI is we don't know what happens and what is being deployed, because it is not like bioweapon or nuclear. You won't come to know unless someone tells you what they have developed. And if you're using superior AI products, so you can imagine whatever they have not deployed, it must be so advanced. So we don't know. It's a big wild card. Okay, this one alone will change all the things that I have just told. But it is nowhere in our conversation. So this brings the big question in the room. Who ultimately has agency for this navigation? Let's suppose we kind of agree that scenario 3 is a good place to go and a good strategy. Who has agency today? You notice that all of our efforts, awareness, research, awareness, protest, ultimately we are knocking some door. Because we feel this guy, this institution, this state will only do this. So all our efforts are about convincing someone else कि भाई you can do it, you should do it, take more data, take more information. But my assessment, the way I understood things, I feel state doesn't have the leading capability in this situation. It cannot, even if it chooses to, whichever state chooses to move towards scenario 3 will be disadvantaged immediately. That is why climate change, nothing happens. Because if any state says we will abandon fossil fuels, it will be uncompetitive, it will be kicked out of the international race. So nobody will do it. So state has no structural incentives to move towards scenario 3. Scenario 1 की तरफ push करना ही उसका goal होने, and everything connected with the state. So not because they are bad actors or whatever, but because I told you structurally GDP is everything. There is no other model. It's only one model. And everything, defense, bureaucracy, centralization, everything depends on that one thing. So states say you should have very reasonable expectations of leading the transition. What about market, the business? Same thing. You cannot be uncompetitive. If you move towards scenario 3, the businesses, the markets, they're not designed for slowing down. They're not designed for this transition. So if you expect them to lead, it is not the optimum way of deploying your time, energy, resources. So that begs the question, who has ultimate agency to lead the transition? It is the third force. I call it the third force, community. They have always existed even before state and business, and they will exist after this also. But this third force is not the conventional community that we think of. Okay? So community has one big advantage. It has no compulsion to grow. It can remain stable. Okay? There is no need for permission from anyone. You don't have to ask for permission to decide to decouple yourself from GIC. Do some optimum things at your own level. Anyways, I'll not get into this, but the main point is agency means navigating towards scenario 3. State has the least, market has the least capacity. State can play a very facilitating role, and I will tell you how. Okay, so after hearing all this, there is a very general tendency for people, to think in their mind, how can I secure myself? How can I secure my family? And then you get into that survivalism and preppers mode. That is the general tendency. Okay, so that is not what I'm talking about. Because you can't survive this. You cannot survive this. There is this very crude statement, but I like very much. Nikita Khrushchev said this during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We should be, the alive ones will be envied of the dead. In a nuclear explosion, those who are alive, they will be envying the dead people. Okay, so this is a simplification phenomenon. That chaotic phase is very similar to that. So survivalism is counterintuitive. It will only make matters worse because it forces you to become very, very individualistic. We need something exactly opposite. There are no safe places, no bunkers. How long you will sit over there? You see, there's a limit. So there are no safe places. Because after some time you expect to come out, right? Where you will come out? To what you will come out? If you leave a reasonable place, then there is a point to come out. So that is only doable now. So this is very strongly discouraged approach to this diagnosis. Jabki it is the most common response. People are thinking कि मैं कैसे? Because it's not a question of 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years. It's a long scale that we are talking about. How are people discussing this problem today? Mainstream. We have summarized everything to, we are saying planetary boundaries are being breached. GIC is causing, what is the main problem? Climate change is the problem. तो क्या करो? Replace fossil fuel with renewables. Problems solved. Of course, you can solve if at all green transition is possible. And I dispute that. Let's suppose even if we assume that all of that 600 gigajoules, exajoules can come from renewables, it will solve the emission problem. But what about the other? But you will be surprised. The entire discourse is about this. Countries meet, they are passing plans, they're making announcements, making commitments. There's all this only. And it is not even true that whole 100% renewable. It's not even true. But even if it were true, what about the rest? That is nobody's concern. So you see, when you frame the discussion in this way and sit for deliberation and resource deployment, what happens? Such valuable time, resource, talent. Everybody is now building batteries. Everybody is, all the best minds, where are they going today? Best minds of this, they're deployed for this question. They didn't frame it. They just think this is the right thing to do because the discourse tells them to do so. Imagine if all of them were to move towards scenario 3. The best minds, best resources, best minds, best skills. If we can make a mess like this in such a short time, why can't we transition in such a short time? It is doable. Okay, it is doable. Okay, so what are the ideas that are normally thrown around? I'll just quickly, for demonstration purpose, what are the mainstream tech-based, market-based solutions thrown at us? And every day we are flooded with buzzwords, okay? I'm just going to, you can read it. Sustainable development, renewables, net zero, hydrogen, circular economy, green growth. You can grow. It is like saying having a safe cancer which can, grow on very safe. Cancer, safe cancer. It's an oxymoron, right? Sustainable development, oxymoron. Green growth is also an oxymoron. Okay, so sustainable blue economy. Words keep coming, okay? Asteroid mining, कहाँ से लाएंगे material? Asteroid में जाके लाएंगे. Okay, terraforming Mars. यहाँ मैस करो, फिर Mars जाके terraform करो, उसको रहने लायक बनाओ. See, we can't handle planet Earth, we can't reduce its harm, but we can terraform that, okay? But it is not wrong, okay? Within that scenario 2, this is a very, because in their mind, spacefaring is the thing, that is what makes us human. Planet Earth is a temporary jumping board. It's a nest for a bird has to fly to deep, wherever it goes. And everybody don't have to, all of us don't have to go. You can just help them go. So some of the good ideas are also thrown, okay? Commons, Wikipedia is a good example of commons, where there's no buying, selling involved. There's no buying, everybody contributes and everybody uses it. That's commons, okay? Regenerative agriculture, open source initiative, I just told you about all the open source initiatives. Permaculture, eco-villages, bioregionalism. These are also the ideas. Transition towns. I will not, we don't have time for discussing this, but I'm just giving you, these ideas are thrown at us, the first slide and the second slide. How will you and I decide which one is correct? We cannot, because we'll say, ये तो experts का काम है. हमको नहीं पता. How do I know which one is good in this, where I should invest, or which one I should protest for, support? I don't know. So expert will tell me. Government will tell me, think tanks will tell me, some scientists will tell me, then I can decide. Otherwise, I can't decide. Okay. I said, if this is the case, then we cannot ever have a collective action. If we are depending on experts to, filter out good and bad ideas, there has to be something simpler which can enable all of us to immediately cut the bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit. They're correct. All of them are correct ideas. But in what context? The context is important. They're not wrong. It is doable. Something doable in a lab cannot be scaled. But it is presented as, oh, aaj ye mil gaya. Sodium se ye battery bana diya. So now, and we buy that thing as a dream. So I've built this tool. It's called Terra. Okay? Tool for existential risk and response assessment. It is basically a very simple tool. It has a x-axis and it has a y-axis. X-axis is basically telling us how well you understand the crisis. It is your crisis comprehension scale. How well do you understand? If you understand only fisheries or plastic problem, only one sectoral problem, you are somewhere in that quadrant one side. On the extreme side, you understand global crisis. Okay? Why? Because it is multi-lens, multi-discipline. On the y-axis is your paradigm, superstructure thinking. Are you confined to the current paradigm? A lot of people will say, कि all this is correct, फॉरेस्ट को बचाना है, रिवर को बचाना है, बट हमको शुगर फैक्ट्री चाहिए, हमको ये भी चाहिए, हमको केमिकल प्लांट भी चाहिए, डेवलपमेंट तो चाहिए ना. Those people are understanding things well, but then they are trapped in that paradigm. This is the way it is. This is the way it is. So, y-axis में top में as you go, you are thinking in terms of scenario 3. A simplified world, but and operating with different value systems. Now I'm giving you very simplified versions of it. Why? Because you can apply it very easily. All the examples which I gave you, right? You can easily place them in one of these quadrants. Quadrant 1 is when you have a very narrow lens diagnosis or of a problem, understanding of a problem, and you are operating within the mainstream. That means you need complexity, you need GIC to be operational, you need technology, high tech to solve that problem. You are. So accelerationists are business as usual. They don't see a major civilizational crisis and they are very happy to grow and they are very happy to use technology. So vast majority of us fall in that quadrant 1. All our efforts. Quadrant 2 is very special. Quadrant 2, which I call weak sustainability. Okay, quadrant 2 mein what has happened? Sophisticated impossibilities. So you will talk about, all kinds of high-tech sustainable development goals, Green New Deal, all the fancy things which I showed you in the previous slide, green hydrogen, this, that, what that lab meat. There are EV technologies, EV, the future of transport, those kind of conversations fall in this category. They'll say, okay, climate change, pollution is a problem, so EV is a solution. Road transport is same. Road transport is same. Mining will happen. You require fossil fuels to create road and to create EV. You're stuck in that paradigm. Quadrant 3 is where all the previous slide I showed, permaculture, bioregionalism. These are the people who are operating in a different value system altogether. Eco-villages, all these kind of initiatives, they are beautiful in the sense they have already recognized long back the industrial civilization problem and they have moved to fragmented islands of efforts. One intentional community here, one large forest creation there. These are the people who don't necessarily understand the scale of the problem that we are facing. I just showed you, right? If we don't transition properly with all those dams, these people, their efforts will not succeed. So what's important is quadrant 3 efforts need to understand the full scale of the situation. Most of these practitioners don't like to theorize stuff and they're very uncomfortable with, they're very happy with their setup. They just love it. But if they don't get their acts together, move towards quadrant 4. So the whole effort here is move people from quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 towards quadrant 4. This whole conversation here is, I am assuming most of you are either in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3 in your day-to-day activities or your professional backgrounds. This conversation is just to give a slight nudge for you to encourage to factor all these things also and move towards quadrant. When you're in quadrant 4, you recognize the need for transition and you recognize the need to work together. This is some joke version of things. Homo sapiens is a deeply conflicted species. What is it saying? And so, while the end of the world scenario will be rife with unimaginable horrors, We believe that the pre-end period will be filled with unprecedented opportunities. This is what boardroom discussions normally are about. How do we cash on this thing, This is the conflict. All those people are just doing good. They're good at their job. They're efficient people. See this. Assuming present trends continue, the odds are quite good that we will become the best informed extinct species on the planet. See? This is very interesting. The problem with your reasoned solution is they don't fit my preconceived notions of the problem. Closing their eyes, denial mode is very common in this field. There is a lot to lose. And this is basically the ostrich mentality. When faced with information that does not agree with their internal structures, they deny, discredit, reinterpret, or forget that information altogether. And this is what will happen with this presentation at the end of the day for many of you also. Okay, it's very, very human to do that. Okay, I will not get into this. We can discuss if you are interested at the Q&A session. These are basically, see, human beings have had a long journey and we have been in similar situations at different times. There are 4 cases here where we have something that we can learn. Japan is the first, perhaps the only civilizational case where they preempted and the collapse and adapted their institutions and their worldview. Between 1603 and 1868, 250 years, they lived a very steady state and a civilization because they immediately experienced a lot of destruction of forest, rivers, and they took a call. They transformed their entire way of living and they preempted a abrupt chaotic collapse. Okay, there's a lot to learn with that experience. Cuba's special period, many of you may be aware that Cuba experienced in the 90s when at the fall of Soviet Union, sudden contraction. They could not get any fossil fuel from Russia, no fertilizers. So overnight the country became organic food growers. Overnight they did some amazing things, both state and community together. So Cuba is a good case where state before collapse has great, traction with its people. Cuba is a case study where it shows that state can play a great role in the transition process. But state and people must share some kind of worldview, otherwise that doesn't happen. Gandhi Kumarappa is another beautiful case. Gandhiji is a strange phenomenon. In India and abroad, all of us accept the political and the cultural Gandhi, but economic Gandhi, nobody remembers. Nobody even wants. I have met Gandhians who do not see eye to eye with Gandhi on the economic idea. So Gandhi was way ahead of his time. Unfortunately, he didn't have the data like I have, but he could see this trend very easily. But still, everybody knows that in 1934, Gandhiji resigned from Congress. But I'm not sure everybody knows that he did so because he wanted to be the president of All India Village Industry Association in Wardha. Yesi Kumarappa, his economist, he became the secretary. And his goal was, let's demonstrate what this Gandhian economy or Swaraj would look like in practice. And I had been to Wardha and I did read those reports, documents, and I was thrilled. I was really thrilled that there is so much that we could draw from, and it's a very sad thing that it's forgotten. But I'm telling you, every idea reaches a stage where its time comes, and I think Gandhi and Kumarappa's time has come now. They're going to be really helpful for scenario 3. De Klerk and South Africa is the apartheid case in the 1990s when you all remember how Nelson Mandela was released from the prison. We all know Nelson Mandela's story. But de Klerk was a prime minister at that time. He was the one who took this call that South Africa will not collapse, it will transition. What makes this case study important is de Klerk was a career apartheid. His entire career, his parents, all of them they built the system over 40 years. But when it became plainly clear that South Africa as a society cannot continue in that direction, he as a leader of the far right made the call to do the transition, get Mandela out, made him the president. So here you see that such actors from which you would not expect to do such U-turns, people have done that in the past. And it became possible because he did it, because then everyone had to stand with him. So we can be a little optimistic about politicians making those very hard choices which normally they would not make. So finally now we are coming to the end of this presentation. Islands via lifeboat strategy. This is the strategy. So paradigm affordance pyramid was a tool. Terra was a tool. This is a strategy. Now given all of us work together, how do we transition? How do we go from point A to point B? So this is a crude way of putting this together. So lifeboat phase is the phase. See, when lifeboat, as in what? Titanic. Imagine a Titanic sinking. So when the Titanic is sinking, what do you do with that time? You build lifeboats. With that lifeboat, you move towards adapt islands. So it's a transition phase. So you cannot build a lifeboat when the Titanic is already down. When you can build it when it is still floating. Okay. So we are in that lifeboat phase, and in lifeboat phase, you are expected to create the infrastructure and institutions which will help us in the navigation phase. So navigation phase is when the things start unraveling. The chaos begins. All those societies who have built lifeboats, good lifeboats at the community level, will experience the navigation phase much better. That is the testing phase. And adaptive phase is the phase where things settle down, the new normal. It could be, I don't know how long it will be, but adaptive phase determined by the first two phases. So this is a very generic way of talking about this transition. The details that this presentation was mostly about diagnosis. But I didn't want to leave it like that. So just for your understanding. Now, how this whole thing will work globally. Remember, this is not a conversation for India. GCF is not a conversation for India alone. As I said, our destiny is coupled. We are civilizational citizens and planetary citizens. So we have to act in coordination. How this transition could actually happen, how phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 could happen. So basically, there are two kinds of efforts simultaneously required. One is the top-down discourse shift conversation. How do you change the conversation? Like I'm trying to do right now. This is the conversation that has to happen top-down percolation, global level. Why? Because we all need to have the same understanding of the situation. As I told you in the beginning, collective action problem cannot be solved unless you find a shared vision, shared language, shared vocabulary. Unless you do that, you cannot work in tandem. So this is the effort, very important. Research, documentation, education, and then spread it across. This is the thing that right now is the focus of my work. B series is basically actually building the infrastructure. So let's put it this way, GCF is not the only way to handle this. This is among the first pieces. Okay, so that means you talk about the transition, but you also start building at the bioregion level. You start building that infrastructure which helps us in the lifeboat navigation and adaptive island phase. What it looks like is not the focus of this discussion. That is details. So what we require is not isolated boats. We require a synchronized armada of lifeboats. So there are a lot of quadrant 3 practitioners all over the world. Right now, they are not acting in unison. They don't have shared realities, shared vision towards which they can move towards. So funds are segregated, resources are segregated, talents are segregated. What they needed to understand that we are all part of that quadrant 4 effort. Scenario 3 effort. That's why I said synchronized armada. There is going to be a lot of pushback. This is not going to be easy journey. But if you have coordinated efforts, then it is a doable thing. So how to do it is getting into the micromanagement aspects. But the fact that I'm making a case that we have to go in that direction. So what is missing? The missing infrastructure is this. The missing infrastructure is something like GCF. Global Crisis Framework is that missing infrastructure connecting all these dots towards with the goal of action. So this is just the summary of of the major 6 ideas. So global crisis describes the predicament. GIC is the name given to a very intangible, abstract civilization, superorganism. The GCF is the name of the framework. Paradigm affordance pyramid. I said it is helping us decode a given situation. What is maladaptation? Terra, as I said, is classification, triage and decision making. I didn't tell you that. Triage is a very important part of Terra. It's a medical term, right? Triage with less resources, how can you best help someone? So in times of crisis and chaos, triage is very important. Which efforts require support, which have to be abandoned. If we are not clear about which ones are worth supporting and which ones have to be let go, then we will make bad choices. And our scenario 3 becomes increasingly difficult. So Terra is that kind of a triage and decision-making tool. Where am I currently deploying my energies? And lastly, as I said, IVLS, okay, islands via lifeboat strategy. My last slide. So the conversation I just did with you, there is a magazine called as Panthi. You can check it online. So very recently, I had published a 6-part interview series. It's like 6 essays where in a question-answer format, all of this is answered. Whatever I explained has been much more simplified and placed over there. So if you are interested, you can definitely read. I think I'll stop here. Thank you so much for being so patient. I think I've exceeded my time limits also. Thank you so much. Now, what do you advise? We can do a Q&A or people want to take a break? Fair enough. I'm here. If you have any questions, I would be happy to. I didn't get you. Can you use the mic? Others can also hear you.
Global level who are doing this, so we can be part of that organization or some in making.
In this integrated fashion, I have not come across.
Require someone who has to take the lead and design the people around and do it. And that's, I think, a very tough job to do.
It is a tough job, yes.
So while you did the study, I'm sure you must have also gone through emotions.
Yes.
What is your biggest concern and what is your biggest hope?
Biggest concern, actually I started with a concern. As you asked, there were a lot of emotions when you reach. So it has moved from hopelessness and, what to do with this to say I am a kind of person who can handle this kind of thing, but it has to be actionable. I could do something about it. And this was a phase where I didn't have the answer, okay, what is to be done about it. I always knew that there is, what has to be clear. What is happening is important question. How something has to be done is the second part. So unless I have the answer to the question what, how it cannot be managed. So for a long time, what was a big problem? I was not able to, if you see, I am not trained in any of these fields. I'm very generalist in this field. So that made it a little challenging for me to get into all this. But I just realized when you have questions, if you have questions, then you definitely bother to know about it. It's just like our report cards, medical reports. We don't understand it, right? But once the number is bold, then we do Google search and find out what it means. Otherwise, we would never do that. So if it has to mean something to you. And once you see something this clearly, you feel concerned. Especially if you have children and if you yourself realize that we are absolutely unprepared, we don't have skills for it, it is an anxiety. So easy option is to just ignore it and say, world will figure it out. That's the best way to handle for most problems. But in this, as I said, you can't be an individual who can have some kind of a secured future. There is no safe place. I have also wondered when I was studying climate change, where should I go and settle in India? But after I did all this, I feel there is, where do I go? Where is the absolute safe place? I don't know which is the safe place. It looks safe. So hope is, now that I have a narrative which makes sense, it is actionable, and I believe that human beings are ingenious creatures. If they get behind something, then we have the experience, we have the culture, and we currently have the technologies working for us. So the hope is it can, before it is too late. I hope I have tried to answer the question.
You helped me realize that I am in quadrant 3. You
Thank
also
you.
helped us realize there is enough urgency and there is a way to get to quadrant 4. So that's
Yes.
my hope now.
That's a great feedback.
Thank
My A series work has, given some result because you said that. You see, the thing is, I'm so happy that you're using those same words. Now we have a word, that quadrant 3 means something. Quadrant 3 means something, and going to 4 means something. So without a big lecture, with just one sentence, you could say where I have to go. And if enough people in your team understand what that means, the thing moves very fast. This is what I meant by shared vocabulary. Now that makes our job very easy. So we are moving away from despair, conversation about कुछ नहीं हो सकता, difficult है, to अच्छा यहाँ से यहाँ जाना है, क्या करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है ये करना पड़ेगा. एक जन करेगा तो हो सकता है और भी लोग करें. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because one of the purposes of this conversation is I would like to know how it lands with everyone. See, because all of you are coming from different backgrounds, it's very important for me to understand how this, because the same message can land very differently with different people. So please be generous with your feedback, and if you have any questions, you can ask now. Otherwise, please fill the feedback with some urgency. Okay. Yes, if there are no questions, we can move towards refreshments. Thank you, everyone.